Choose one of my daughters, human. They laughed when I picked the worst, until she proved otherwise. Part 1. The Choosing. Ambassador Cole had seen many strange things during his 10 years in the diplomatic corps. He had negotiated with beings made of living crystal. He had shared meals with species that communicated through color. He had even once attended a funeral that lasted 3 weeks because the deceased kept interrupting to correct the speeches. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, standing in the great hall of Prime, being offered a wife. The hall itself was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. The walls were made of something like pearl, but they pulsed with soft light. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into darkness, and the floor was covered with patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't watching them directly. Thousands of filled the space, their tall forms draped in flowing fabrics that caught the light. Their skin glowed with bioluminescence, patterns shifting across their faces and hands like living artwork. High Matriarch sat on a throne made of the same pearly material as the walls. She was ancient by standards, over 800 years old, and her light patterns moved with a complexity that made eyes water. When she spoke, her voice carried throughout the hall without any apparent effort. "You come seeking mining rights in the outer system," she said. It was not a question. "You offer technology and trade, but you ask for much, little human. The minerals in those asteroids have been ours since before your species learned to make fire." Kept his face calm. He had practiced this expression in front of a mirror for weeks. They could read human expressions almost as easily as they read each other's light patterns, and showing nervousness would be fatal to the negotiations. "We understand the value of what we ask," he replied. "That is why we come with respect and open hands. We seek partnership, not conquest." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. The patterns on her skin flickered with colors had learned meant amusement mixed with contempt. Around the hall, other echoed her light patterns. "Partnership," she repeated. "Very well, human. Let us speak of partnership. Among my people, the strongest alliances are sealed through marriage. If you truly wish to bind our peoples together, I offer you a great honor. Choose one of my daughters as your ceremonial bride." The hall fell silent, felt the weight of thousands of glowing eyes upon him. He understood immediately what this was. A test. A trap. He was being set up to fail, to prove that humans were shallow creatures unworthy of true alliance. "I am honored," he said carefully. "I accept." His patterns flickered with surprise. She had expected him to refuse or to fumble. Instead, he had walked straight into her game. Her amusement grew brighter. "Bring my daughters," she commanded. They entered through a side door, walking in order of their status. The eldest came first. Her name was, and she blazed like a star. Her bioluminescence was so bright that had to squint. She moved with perfect grace, every step a dance, every gesture a poem. She did not look at it all. The second daughter was, whose light patterns formed geometric shapes of impossible complexity. The third was, who was said to be the most beautiful in 3 generations. The fourth, fifth, and sixth daughters followed, each one stunning in her own way, each one radiating power and status. And then came the 7th. She entered quietly, almost slipping through the door as if hopping not to be noticed. Her light was dim, barely visible, flickering like a candle about to go out. She walked with a slight limp, favoring her left leg. Where her sisters wore flowing gowns that caught and reflected their brilliance, she wore simple dark fabric that seemed designed to hide her. The court barely hid their contempt. Light patterns flashed with mockery and disgust. This was, the broken one, the embarrassment. She had survived an accident in childhood that had damaged her bioluminescence permanently. In a society where light was everything, she was practically invisible. Evan's patterns showed a flicker of embarrassment at having to present this daughter. Studied each of them in turn. Then he did something unexpected. "I would like to speak with each of your daughters privately," he said, "if that is permitted." His patterns showed confusion. "This is not part of the ritual." "Among my people," replied, "we believe that a marriage should be based on understanding. Surely a few minutes of conversation cannot harm the process." The matriarch considered this. The court waited. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, you may have 5 minutes with each." The conversations were held in a small room off the main hall. One by one, the daughters came to speak with him. Spoke of her accomplishments. She had won 17 awards for her light displays. She had composed symphonies of color that were performed throughout the hegemony. She was fluent in 43 languages. She did not ask a single question. Spoke of her family's power. She explained in great detail how important her mother was and how much status would gain by choosing her. She mentioned twice that humans were considered a lesser species by most. She also did not ask him anything. The other sisters were similar. They spoke of themselves, their beauty, their talents, their connections. They treated the conversation as a performance, a chance to display their worth. None of them seemed to care who actually was. Then came. She entered the room with her head down, clearly expecting nothing. When she sat across from him, her dim light flickered nervously. "You do not have to pretend," she said quietly. "I know you will not choose me. No one would. I am only here because my mother cannot exclude me without breaking tradition." Leaned forward. "Tell me about yourself." She blinked. The request clearly surprised her. "There is nothing to tell. I have no accomplishments to list. I have won no awards. I am what you see." "Then tell me about something else. Tell me about Earth. What do you know about my world?" For the first time, a spark of interest appeared in her dim light. "Earth," she said slowly. "It is a world with only one sun. Your species cannot produce light from your bodies. You communicate through sound and facial movements." She paused. "Is it true that humans bond for life, that you choose one partner and stay with them until death?" "Some of us do," said, "when we find the right person." "How do you know?" she asked. "How do you know when you have found them? Without light patterns to read, without bioluminescence to share, how do humans understand each other?" Smiled. "We talk, we listen. We pay attention to what people do, not just what they show." Was quiet for a moment. "That sounds peaceful," she said. "To be understood for who you are inside rather than how brightly you shine." Their 5 minutes ended too quickly. As she rose to leave, spoke again. "What happened to your leg?" She paused at the door. Her light flickered with something that might have been old pain. "An accident," she said. "When I was young, a fall from a balcony." She did not say more, but saw the way her dim light briefly pulsed with patterns that suggested the fall had not been an accident at all. When all the conversations were complete, returned to the great hall. The court watched him with barely hidden amusement. The 6 elder daughters stood in a line, their combined brilliance almost painful to look at, stood apart, half hidden in the shadows. "You have spoken with my daughters," said. "Now make your choice human." Walked forward. He passed, whose light blazed with confidence. He passed, and in all the others. He walked to where stood in the shadows. "I choose her," he said. The hall erupted in laughter. Thousands of flashed their lights in patterns of mockery and disbelief. Even could not hide her amusement. The human had made himself a fool. He had chosen the broken daughter, the embarrassment, the one no would ever want. "You are certain?" asked, her patterns dancing with barely contained mirth. "You may not change your mind." "I am certain," said. "Then it is done. Take her. The marriage will be finalized tonight." The ceremony was brief and perfunctory. Clearly wanted to be rid of her broken daughter as quickly as possible. The court continued to flash their amusement throughout. Only remained quiet, her dim light barely visible. As they walked out of the palace toward the human shuttle, finally spoke. "Why?" she asked. "You could have had any of them, who shines like a star, who is said to be the most beautiful in generations. Why did you choose me?" Looked at her. In the dim light of the corridor, away from the blazing display of the court, her own faint glow seemed almost comfortable, natural. "Your sisters wanted to be chosen," he said. "They performed for me. They tried to impress me with their light and their accomplishments. But they never once asked who I was. They never tried to understand me." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You did. You asked about my world. You asked how humans find love. You wanted to understand who was choosing, not just be chosen. That is rarer than beauty. That is rarer than light." Stared at him. For the first time, her dim light steadied. It did not blaze or dance or perform. It simply glowed, warm and soft. "You are very strange," she said, "for a human." "I have been told that before," replied. He offered her his arm in the human fashion. "Come, let me show you my world." Behind them, the palace of Prime glittered with 1,000 mocking lights. No one noticed when the broken daughter left with her human fool. No one thought to wonder why a veteran diplomat would make such an obvious mistake. No one realized that the mistake was theirs. Part 2, The Revelation. 6 months passed, and the hegemony waited for news of the human ambassador's humiliation. They expected reports of the broken daughter being a burden. They expected Cole to struggle with his dim, damaged wife. They expected complaints, requests to dissolve the marriage, perhaps even a formal apology for wasting everyone's time. Instead, there was silence. Worse than silence, there was success. The trade negotiations, which had stalled for years, suddenly moved forward. Human diplomats appeared at meetings with information they should not have possessed. They knew about internal disputes within the hegemony. They knew about secret deals between the great houses. They knew which nobles were in debt, which ones had enemies, which ones could be swayed. The humans never said where this information came from. They simply used it, carefully and precisely, to strengthen their position in every negotiation. High Matriarch grew suspicious. She summoned her advisors and demanded answers. How were the humans gaining such detailed knowledge of hegemony affairs? Had there been a leak? A spy? Her advisors had no answers. The intelligence appeared to come from nowhere. "Send observers," commanded. "Watch the human embassy, watch my daughter, find out what is happening." The observers were the best the hegemony had. They could blend into any environment, read any light pattern, detect any deception. They watched the human embassy for 3 weeks. What they reported back shocked the matriarch to her core. The broken daughter was not broken at all. "Her dim light is not a defect," the lead observer reported, his own patterns showing confusion and something like fear. "It is control, complete and total control. She can suppress her bioluminescence at will. She shows only what she wants to show. In all my years, I have never seen anything like it." Leaned forward on her throne. "Explain." "Among our people, light is communication. We cannot hide our emotions. When we feel joy, we glow with joy. When we feel anger, our patterns show anger. But she has learned to silence herself completely. She can watch others while remaining unread. She can be in a room, listening, observing, and no one notices her because she gives nothing away." "How is this possible?" The observer hesitated. "The injury, the one she received as a child. It damaged her ability to produce normal light, but it also freed her from the obligation to display. She spent decades learning to read others while hiding herself. She became invisible in a world that values brightness above all else. No one paid attention to the dim daughter in the corner, so she watched, and she learned. Sat very still. The implications were becoming clear. What has she learned? Everything, matriarch. She has been watching the court for over 200 years. She knows every secret, every alliance, every betrayal. She knows which nobles take bribes and from whom. She knows which houses are planning to move against you. She knows things that our own intelligence services have never discovered. The observer's patterns showed deep unease. And now she is married to a human who actually listens to her, a human who values her mind instead of her light. She is not a burden to Ambassador Cole. She is the most valuable asset humanity has ever acquired, and they did not even have to steal her. You gave her away. Slight blazed with fury. Around the throne room, her advisors backed away, their own patterns showing fear. "What else?" she demanded. "What else did you observe?" The observer swallowed. "She is happy, matriarch, truly happy. Human culture does not work the way ours does. In their marriages, partners are equals, they share decisions, they talk to each other. Ambassador Cole does not treat as a symbol of status or a tool for alliance. He treats her as a partner, a friend. She has never had that before." He paused, then added quietly, "She smiles now. Real smiles, not the mask she wore in court." Dismissed the observer with a wave of her hand. For a long time, she sat alone on her throne, her light patterns churning with emotions too complex to name. She had given away a weapon. She had thrown aside a treasure because it did not shine brightly enough. The daughter she had considered worthless had become humanity's greatest advantage in their dealings with the hegemony. But it was not too late. There were ways to reclaim what had been lost. Ancient traditions that allowed a matriarch to take back a daughter from an unsuitable marriage. All she had to do was prove that the human could not protect his wife. Began to plan. Across the stars, in the human embassy on a neutral station, felt a chill run through her. She was sitting in the small garden had built for her, surrounded by plants from a dozen different worlds. He had noticed that she liked green things, living things, and he had created this space without being asked. That was the kind of person he was. He paid attention. He noticed the small things that others missed. It was one of the reasons she had fallen in love with him. Not the political alliance love that practiced, where marriages were contracts and affection was performance. Real love. The kind humans wrote songs about. The kind that made her light glow warm and soft without any effort to control it. But now that warmth was touched by cold. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the way the communications from the hegemony had shifted over the past few days. The patterns were too careful, too controlled. Her mother was planning something. Found her there an hour later, staring at a field with intercepted messages. "You have that look," he said, sitting down beside her. "The one that means you have seen something I should worry about." "My mother knows," said quietly. "She has figured out that I am not the burden she expected. She sent observers, they saw. Enough." Nodded slowly. "We knew this day might come. What will she do?" "She cannot simply demand me back. That would be an admission of her own mistake, and she will never do that. But there is an old tradition, the Festival of Radiance. It happens once every 50 years, and the next one is in 3 months. During the festival, a matriarch can challenge any marriage she considers unsuitable. If the husband cannot defend his wife in the traditional contest, the marriage is dissolved." "What kind of contest?" "A combination of physical combat and political maneuvering. Champions have trained their whole lives for it. The rules are complex, the traditions are ancient, and—" She looked at him with something like fear in her dim light. "And no human has ever participated. You would be expected to fail. That is the point. She is setting a trap that you cannot escape." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Your mother has made a mistake," he said. "What mistake?" "She is thinking like a, she expects me to act like a, to fight like a, to lose like a, but I am not. I am human. And humans—" He reached out and took her hand. "Humans adapt. We change. We find new ways to solve old problems. That is what we do. The traditions are strict. The rules are ancient. You cannot simply ignore them." "No," agreed. "But I bet there are loopholes. There always are. And you have spent 200 years watching the court, learning its secrets. You know every rule, every tradition, every exception." He squeezed her hand. "Teach me," he said. "We have 3 months. That is not much time, but it is enough. Teach me everything you know. Help me find the weaknesses in your mother's plan. We will face this together." Stared at him. In her 200 years of life, no one had ever asked her to teach them anything. No one had ever valued her knowledge enough to want it. "You really think we can win?" "I think your mother has never faced anyone like us before. A who learned to be invisible and a human who learned to see what others miss." He smiled. "We are going to surprise her." For the first time in months, felt the fear in her chest begin to ease. She looked at this strange human, this man who had chosen her when no one else would, who had seen value in her when her own mother saw only disappointment. "Very well," she said. "Let us begin." Over the next 3 months, they worked. Every day, taught about the traditions of the festival, the combat forms, the political games. She showed him the weaknesses in fighting styles, the assumptions they made, the rules they never questioned because they had never needed to. And taught her about humanity, about adaptability, about the stubborn refusal to accept defeat, about the human talent for taking the rules of a game and using them in ways the creators never intended. 3 months passed quickly. when the summons to the Festival of Radiance arrived, was ready. "Are you afraid?" asked her the night before they departed. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of losing. I am afraid of what my mother will do when she realizes she has underestimated us both." She smiled, and for the first time in her life, it was the smile of someone who was not afraid of being seen. "My mother is about to learn why you never discard a daughter. You just teach her that family is wherever she chooses it to be." Part 3, The Proving. The Festival of Radiance was the most spectacular event in the calendar. Once every 50 years, the great houses gathered on Prime to celebrate their culture, renew their alliances, and settle their disputes. The whole planet blazed with light as millions of displayed their bioluminescence in coordinated patterns that could be seen from orbit. Into this sea of brilliance came Cole, and two small figures who barely seemed to glow at all. The great hall of the matriarch was even more crowded than it had been 9 months ago. Representatives from every noble house filled the space, their combined light almost painful to look at. On her throne, High Matriarch waited with patterns of false welcome dancing across her skin. "My daughter," she said as they approached, "how good of you to return, and you have brought your husband." The word dripped with contempt. "Mother's voice was calm, but noticed that her dim light had steadied into something harder than he had ever seen. "You summoned us. We came." "Indeed, I have grown concerned about your marriage," rose from her throne, her light patterns projecting sincerity that fooled no one. "A mother worries. I wish to be certain that your human husband is truly capable of caring for you. According to our ancient traditions, I invoke the right of concern. The human will prove his worth in the traditional contest, or the marriage will be dissolved." The court buzzed with anticipation. This was the entertainment they had come for. The foolish human would be humiliated. The broken daughter would be reclaimed. Everything would return to the way it should be. Stepped forward. "I accept the challenge." "You understand what you are agreeing to?" asked, her patterns showing barely hidden amusement. "The contest has 3 parts: combat, strategy, and judgment. Champions train for centuries to master these challenges. You have had, how long? 9 months. 9 months, agreed, and a very good teacher." He glanced at, who stood perfectly still, her dim light revealing nothing. The first challenge was combat, was led to an arena in the center of the hall, a circular space marked with ancient symbols. His opponent was a warrior named, who had won the last 3 festivals. Stood 2 feet taller than, and his bioluminescence was so bright it cast shadows. "The rules are simple," announced the officiator. "Force your opponent from the circle or make them yield. No weapons, no lethal strikes. Begin." Moved first, flowing forward in the graceful combat style that had perfected over. His movements were beautiful, choreographed, precise. Did not move beautifully, he moved efficiently. Had taught him that combat was as much about display as effectiveness. They telegraphed their moves with their light patterns, treating battle as a performance. They expected their opponents to respond in kind, to match grace with grace. Did not play that game. When swept in with an elaborate spinning strike, simply stepped to the side and stuck out his foot. The champion, mid-spin, caught his ankle on the obstruction and stumbled. Before he could recover, had grabbed his arm and used his own momentum to send him sprawling toward the edge of the circle. Caught himself just in time, his patterns flashing with shock and anger. This was not how combat was supposed to work. This was crude, inelegant, wrong. He attacked again, this time with more force and less grace. Blocked, redirected, and countered with moves from half a dozen different human martial arts. He mixed judo with boxing, wrestling with street fighting. Nothing he did was pretty. All of it was effective. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They had expected the human to be destroyed in seconds. Instead, he was holding his own against their greatest champion. The fight lasted 10 minutes. In the end, managed to catch in a hold that the champion had never seen before, a simple wrestling move that humans had been using for thousands of years. Faced with a choice between a dislocated shoulder and defeat, yielded. The hall was silent. Then, slowly, patterns began to flash. Not mockery this time, something closer to uncertainty. The human had won the first challenge. The second challenge was strategy. And chosen champions sat across from each other at a game board covered with hundreds of small glowing pieces. The game was called Luminance, and it had been played for 10,000 years. It required decades to master and a lifetime to perfect. Had taught the rules, but she had also taught him something more important. She had taught him how players thought. They valued elegant solutions, complex strategies, beautiful patterns of play. They considered direct approaches to be crude and embarrassing. Played directly. He made simple moves, obvious moves, moves that any beginner would make. His opponent initially treated this with contempt, assuming the human simply did not understand the deeper game. But as the match continued, the champion began to realize that the simple moves were working. Without elegant feints to defend against, without complex patterns to decode, the champion's own sophisticated strategy became a liability. She was fighting shadows while walked straight toward victory. The match ended within control of the board, not through brilliant play, but through relentless, simple effectiveness. 2 challenges down, 1 to go. The final challenge was judgment. In this phase, the challenger had to prove their worth to the assembled houses by demonstrating wisdom, insight, and understanding. It was traditionally the easiest challenge for champions, who could dazzle the crowd with displays of cultural knowledge and philosophical depth. It was also where it planned her final trap. For the final challenge, she announced, the human must answer a question posed by any member of the court. Answer wisely and you pass. Answer foolishly and you fail. Her patterns danced with hidden triumph. I shall pose the question myself. She turned to face directly. Human, you have taken my daughter from her home, her people, her family. You have used her for your own purposes. Tell me, what right do you have to claim her as your wife? It was a trap question. Any answer gave could be twisted. If he claimed love, would say he could not truly love what he did not understand. If he claimed duty, she would say he was treating as property. If he claimed benefit to humanity, she would say he was using her daughter as a tool. But had prepared him for this too. I have no right, said. The court stirred with confusion, even looked surprised. I have no right to claim anyone, continued. In my culture, one person does not claim another. Marriage is not ownership. It is partnership. I did not take from her home. You gave her away because you considered her worthless. I did not use her for my purposes. She chose to share her knowledge with me because she wanted to. I do not claim her as my wife. She chose to be my partner, and I was honored that she did. He turned to look at, who stood watching with her light perfectly controlled. The real question is not what right I have to claim her. The question is what right you have to discard her. She is brilliant, observant, and wise. She has knowledge that no one else in your hegemony possesses because she learned to see while everyone else was too busy shining. And you threw her away because her light was dim. His voice grew stronger. You want to know what makes me worthy of your daughter? Nothing. I am not worthy. I am just a human who happened to ask the right questions and listen to the answers. But you, matriarch, you had 200 years to see what was right in front of you and you never looked. Your daughter is not broken. She never was. You were just too blinded by your own light to see her. The hall was absolutely silent, then stepped forward. For the first time in her life, she allowed her light to blaze. It was not the cold fire of her sisters, not the practiced elegance of the court. It was something raw and fierce, 200 years of suppressed power finally set free. Her patterns told a story that everyone could read. Years of pain, years of being overlooked and discarded, years of watching and learning and waiting for someone, anyone, to see her. And then she spoke. For 2 centuries, I watched this court, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I watched the great houses scheme and betray each other. I watched my mother make deals in the shadows while speaking of honor in the light. I watched my sisters receive everything while I received nothing, and I learned. She turned to face the assembled houses. I know that house is secretly funding the separatist movement in the outer systems. I know that house has been bribing officials to secure mining contracts. I know that my mother ordered the assassination of 3 political rivals in the past decade alone." Gasps echoed through the hall. Light patterns flashed with shock and fear. "I have evidence," continued. "Documents, recordings, testimony. I have spent 200 years collecting the secrets of this court, and I will release them all if my mother does not withdraw her challenge." Rose from her throne, her light blazing with fury. "You would not dare. You would destroy your own family." "You are not my family," said quietly. "You never were. Family does not discard its children. Family does not push them from balconies." A new wave of shock rippled through the court. Even the elder sisters looked stunned. The fall that had damaged bioluminescence had not been an accident. "Withdraw the challenge," said. "Accept that my marriage is valid, and I will keep your secrets. Continue to threaten what I have built, and I will burn this entire court to the ground." For a long moment, no one moved, then slowly sank back onto her throne. Her light dimmed to almost nothing. "The challenge is withdrawn," she said, her voice barely audible. "The marriage stands." The court erupted into chaos. Houses that had been allied with began pulling away, their patterns showing calculation. 3 of the great houses formally declared their support for, recognizing her as the most dangerous player on the board. By the time dawn broke over Prime, the political landscape had changed completely. Remained matriarch, but her power was broken. The houses that had once followed her now watched with wary respect. Some of them even approached with offers of alliance. One house suggested that should take her mother's place. With her knowledge and her connections to humanity, she could rule the hegemony more effectively than ever had. Considered the offer for exactly 3 seconds before declining. "Give the position to," she said. "My eldest sister. She always showed me small kindnesses when no one was watching. She will rule well." The houses were confused. Why would she give away such power? Understood. He had been watching throughout the night, seeing the way her light gradually dimmed back to its normal soft glow. She was tired. Not physically tired, but tired of this place, these people, these endless games of power and light. He walked to her side and took her hand. "Ready to go home?" he asked. She looked at him, at his plain human face that could not glow or shine or display patterns, at his simple human hand that was warm in hers. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." They walked out of the great hall together, past the hundreds of blazing who watched them go, did not move from her throne. The elder sisters stood in uncertain clusters, only Met's eyes and gave a small nod of respect. "You could have ruled them all," said as they descended the palace steps toward the human shuttle. "I could have," agreed, "but I spent my whole life in that cage. Why would I want a bigger one?" She paused at the bottom of the steps and looked back at the palace one last time. It was beautiful, she supposed. All that light, all that history, all that power. Once she had dreamed of being accepted there, of shining as brightly as her sisters, of earning her mother's approval. Now she had something better. She had someone who saw her in the dark. "Come on," she said, turning away from the palace. "Let us go home." Behind them, the court of Prime watched the broken daughter leave with her human husband. No one laughed this time. No one made jokes about the dim one and the fool who had chosen her. They had learned something that day. They had learned that light was not everything. They had learned that the one who watches from the shadows can be more dangerous than the one who blazes at the center of attention. And they had learned, perhaps most importantly, never to underestimate a human. Because humans did not play by the rules, they adapted, they changed, they found new ways to win old games. And sometimes, they even fell in love with the daughters that everyone else had forgotten. The end.